remainder of my speech is incorporated into the record of proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Coomera.
Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, I rise to respond to the budget handed down on Tuesday by the Treasurer. And what can I say? I feel like it's a broken record, because I talked about these issues last year and the year before, and indeed using Exit 38 as the example, the business case has been on the minister's desk since 2018, and there is not $1 in this budget for Exit 38. Now, is it becoming a little bit of a time issue? I can assure you it is, because recently, indeed it was last December, we were advised that by 2026 the harness racing facility will be opening 8 kilometres down the road from Exit 38 at Norwell in 2026. We're just 3 years away. No funding for Exit 38. It's a $110 billion, I'm told, project. There needs to be some work done with the federal government about that particular project for no other reason other than it is already a high priority project. And now we've got the harness racing facility opening in 2026, four meetings a week for that. We've got the Visi project opening in 2026-27, $500 million, more industrial uptake in the area, and it's already a heavily congested exit. So there's a classic example. We put a petition in, and the minister came back and said, "Oh well, there's some planning got to be done, and we'll get around to asking the federal government for some money on that." Now, what's the difference between the current federal government and the previous federal government? Well, I'll tell you. The previous federal government, the state would get a commitment from the previous federal government through Bert van Manen, the local federal member, for 50% of the funding. Listen up, you'll learn something. For 50% of the funding before they had to spend the resources, the time resources and what have you, to do the planning for exits. Now let me use a couple of examples. Exit 41. Exit 41, it's nowhere near finished. It's nowhere near efficient. It has a lot more work to be done to it. Indeed, one of the slip lanes, or the only slip lane that we've got, still isn't open for no apparent reason off Exit 41. But that funding and that exit upgrade came into effect because the federal member for Ford got the 50% funding before these guys even thought about it. And it took them about 5 minutes to come in and say, yep, they're going to throw in the other 50% of funding. And then we went through the planning process. And there it is. Exit 49, same thing. 50% of the funding from the federal government before we had to worry about going and trying to do planning with this, that and the other thing. The funding was there. 5 minutes later, they came in and said, yep, we'll tip the other 50% of the funding in. Now, they got stuck in the slow lane on that one, which is fairly typical for this bloke. They got stuck in the slow lane, and it's only just started. The funding was made available in 2019, and they've only just, in the last several months, started construction on Exit 49. So now we get letters from the minister telling us that we're going to do it in reverse now. We're not going to do it that way. What we're going to do, for example, at Exit 45, is we're going to do some planning with $1.5 million, and then, but we're not going to do that now that it's in a hell of a mess, now that it's an absolute quagmire because of the Band-Aid solution that they put in place that correctly resolved the issue of safety for ramping on the M1. That fixed that. But the problem is now we've got worse congestion at exit 45 now than before. We ran a petition on it. The minister's written back to us and said, we're going to do some planning, but we're not doing the planning now with that $1.5 million. We're doing the planning in 2027. It's already heavily congested, and we're not going to do the planning until 2027. Then, after we've done the planning, we're going to go off to the federal government and ask them for the money. And fingers crossed, they're going to give us some money. But remember, they've cut a few projects lately, so what's the chances of us getting the money out of the federal government? We're going to be lucky to see the upgrade at exit 45 before 2030. In fact, we're going to be lucky to see the upgrade at exit 45 under this mob before the Olympic Games. So there's two examples. OK, we will. We'll fund it. In our government, after the next election,
Order.
we will fund it. We'll put the money up.
Order.
We'll go off to the feds. We'll go off to the feds and ask them for the other half of the money.
Pause the clock.
That's what we'll do.
Member for Maryborough, you're not in your chair. It will stop, or else I'll warn you. So it must stop. The member for Coomera, you've got the floor.
Thank you. We will fund it. After October next year, we'll do the job that you mob should have been doing years ago on exit 38 and exit 45.
Through the chair.
Commercial industrial
Order.
areas, the commercial industrial areas in the northern Gold Coast, in the Yatala precinct.
Member for Coomera, through the chair.
What? Sorry.
Beg your pardon? Hang on, pause the clock. Member for Coomera, through the chair. You're directing it at the Treasurer. I'm watching you, just through the chair.
I didn't say you.
Order. I'll start warning people. It's getting out of control. Member for Coomera, you've got the floor. 8 minutes.
The industrial area on the northern Gold Coast, centred on Yatala, is log-jammed every day. Not just 5 days a week, not just through the week, 7 days a week. And this mob think it's funny. They think it's an absolute hilarious joke.
Member for Pine Rivers.
The northern Gold Coast is yet again left in the slow lane, stuck in the slow lane because of the lack of funding from this government. Remember I said that business case has been there since 2018 and there's not $1, and yet we're staring down the throat of the harness racing facility that's being moved from Brisbane for the Olympic Games.
Order.
Going out to Norwell. So they're just two small examples which are huge for the northern Gold Coast. Exit 45 and exit 38. They don't care, they don't understand, they don't realise the impact every day on the people of the northern Gold Coast. You know the saddest part of this last budget? It's the same as the saddest part of the budget before. No new money. No new money for any projects. The headlines that we saw on the Gold Coast Bulletin, one of them was for $2.1 billion for health. No, it's not new money. That's $2.1 billion that was announced last year. What about the $1.3 billion for transport? No, that was announced last year. It's just been re-announced. And they get the headline. That's what they're all about. That's what these lot are all about. They're all about getting the headline. They're all about saying, look at us, look at us, look at us, but they don't deliver. They're years behind on Cross River Rail. They've got trains coming. They've got trains coming for Cross River Rail 2 years later than Cross River Rail. They can't even deliver the rolling stock on time for Cross River Rail. How long have they known about Cross River Rail and when it's going to be completed?
Member for Maryborough.
Years. Years. They've known about it, and they've only finally got around to saying, yep, righto, we're going to let some contracts and we're going to build the trains. Oh, but it's going to be 2 years later that we're actually going to deliver the trains. And the police. I thanked the government for delivering a police station to the northern Gold Coast, the Pimpama station, the hard-fought-for Pimpama police station. It took us years to get it across the line, but we got it across the line. Katarina Carroll came in and she told me herself, when she saw what was going on, it was a no-brainer. Her words, a no-brainer. She delivered the police station for Pimpama. But you know what happened? They gave us 35 new police, and then they took them away. We've now got a police station at Pimpama with less than 75% of the police we were promised 1 year ago. That's what this mob are all about. Look at us, we're going to give you 35 coppers. No, you're not. You're going to pretend to give us 35 coppers, just like you've been pretending to increase the number of police for the whole state. We're going to give you 1,450 police. No, you're not. You're going to fund 1,450 police, but they're not. You're going to approve them, but they're not going to be put in place. They're not going to be actual. So I've gone from 35 back to something like 26 coppers for Pimpama, but it gets worse because I had 81 coppers at Coomera Station, 81. Now we're back to around about 60. And what's the story? What's the story? We've got less than 75% of the police promised for the northern Gold Coast, on the northern Gold Coast, the fastest growing region in Queensland, and it was acknowledged when those police were committed to the northern Gold Coast that they were needed just then to catch up with population growth. And here we are, 12 months down the track, and they've taken 25% of the coppers away from us. And what's that doing for the police that are on the ground? They are working hard. They are doing the best they can. In fact, they're fighting above their weight. They are doing a fantastic job. But the problem is they're under huge stress. They're under huge pressure. We've got police officers that are on stress leave now, long-term stress leave, some of them. And what's that doing to the ones that are left on the ground on the northern Gold Coast? It is putting them under more stress. And this mob don't get it. Fastest growing region in the state, fastest growing region, some say, in Australia, and they've taken 25% of the coppers away in 12 months. It's not on. And that's what we're up against with that lot over there every year. No infrastructure investment, no additional infrastructure investment, stuck in the slow line on the investment. The train station at Pimpama, promised in 2017 before the 2017 election. I know I sound like a broken record because I've been saying this for the last 6 years, and we'll eventually get it
Member for Pine Rivers.
2024. They were going to deliver it in 2025, but we kicked up a bit of a stink, and they said, no, we'll deliver that one in 2024. 7 years before they promised that train station, and we're now going to hopefully, fingers crossed, get it. Exit 49's now been pushed back to 2024-25 instead of 2023-24 completion. Once again, because of the incompetence of that minister, because of the incompetence of this government in delivering the infrastructure that's needed. And what about where the second M1 is going to come out? At Foxwell Road. The first stage of the first stage, Stage 1 North, is going to deliver traffic from Helensvale and further south onto Foxwell Road at precisely the same moment that the hospital's coming up out of the ground, just off Foxwell Road, 300 metres off Foxwell Road. at precisely the same moment that 2 private hospitals are going to be coming up out of the ground, and 4,000 additional residential properties are going to start being delivered just north of Costco, which is about to be opened next week. That's the situation that we've got. There's no planning for the second M1, the Coomera Connector, whatever you want to call it, from Shipper Drive north. They've got $22 million in the budget and they've got no plan to deliver any of it before 2027. Indeed, once again, we're going to be very fortunate if we get that before the Olympic Games.